Under the cold white light of the Dominion's war hall, Captain Elias Merrick felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes pressed down on him. The chamber rose in tiers like a gladiator's amphitheater, each level filled with species bred and perfected for war. Armored carapaces gleamed. Flesh was sheathed in chrome. Every soldier stood with the posture of one who had never tasted defeat. And then there was him, an old Terran with weather-creased skin, a ruined left eye, and a rifle that looked like it had been pulled from a museum basement. The Dominion's High Marshal, a towering insectoid called HFY regarded him with a compound gaze that reflected disdain from a dozen mirrored facets. Species 73. The voice intoned through a translator's sterile modulation. Representative selected. Captain Elias Merrick of Homo sapiens. Equipment. Ballistic projectile weapon. Antiquated. Suboptimal. Inadmissible for competitive warfare. Yet by archaic trial law, permissible. A ripple of laughter moved through the hall. The kind that was sharp enough to cut. In one section, a serpentine warrior coiled tighter around itself, hissing softly at the sight of the rifle's rusted barrel. An avian officer's crest feathers shivered with amusement. The noise built until it seemed to rattle the floor beneath Elias's boots. Elias shifted the rifle strap higher on his shoulder and said nothing. He had heard laughter like this before. On the day his platoon was ordered to hold a ridge against armor they couldn't hope to destroy, and again when his colony's petition for aid had been thrown into the void without response. The sound had never saved anyone. The Dominion's chief archivist, Devore, floated forward in a grav chair, a thin-bodied creature of parchment skin and translucent membranes stretched over a narrow skull. His hands moved quickly over a crystalline data slab. Trial context. As per the covenant of subjugated territories, the outcome will determine the sovereignty of the disputed human colonies of Callisto Verge. Failure in combat will result in immediate annexation. Victory will yield limited autonomy under Dominion oversight. His voice carried the cold satisfaction of one recording an inevitability. Elias caught his reflection in the polished floor. He looked like hell, the set of his jaw carved by years of stubborn survival, his uniform patched with mismatched fabrics from half a dozen campaigns. But the rifle in his hands, God, that rifle looked worse. Pitted steel, a wooden stock darkened with oil and sweat, a scope whose glass bore a faint crack across the corner. It had belonged to his father before him, and his grandfather before that. Every scrape in the stock had a name, and every name was someone who'd made it home. Your opponent, HFY said, stepping forward, is me. The champion's armor was a lattice of crystal and alloy, refracting the hall's light into cold, precise rainbows. Forearms rested easily at his sides, two holding weapons whose edges shimmered with contained plasma. No expression touched his alien features, but Elias felt the sheer force of confidence radiating from him. This was a creature who had never once missed a killing blow. In his peripheral vision, Elias saw the holoscreens above the court flash statistical readouts. Reaction time, projected engagement duration, likelihood of survival, 43 seconds. He smirked despite himself. Longer than I thought. The translator hesitated as it processed his words. HFY tilted his head slightly, puzzled. You are aware, the Marshal said slowly, that in every simulation you perish before inflicting measurable damage? Simulations are for people who can't afford mistakes, Elias said. Lucky for me, I'm human. The hall grew quiet at that, the laughter cooling into a brittle silence. Elias knew they thought it was bravado. In truth, it was simply the fact. Humans didn't fight clean. They fought messy, and messy didn't simulate well. Devore cleared his throat membranes. Trial will commence at first light cycle. Location, Arena Theta 9, environmental conditions randomized. He glanced at Elias with the curiosity of a scholar examining a strange insect. Do you require a replacement weapon? Elias shook his head. This one's broken in. Later, in the barracks assigned to him, Elias sat on a narrow cot and stripped the rifle down to its bones. The air smelled faintly of sterilized metal and recycled oxygen. Too clean, too artificial. He ran an oiled cloth along the barrel, feeling each imperfection under his fingertips. His father's voice came back to him from years ago on a rain-slick fence line. Don't aim until you know you're ready to pull the trigger. And when you pull it, don't miss. A medic passed by his door, glanced in, then moved on without speaking. Elias didn't mind. He preferred silence before a fight. Silence was where he could hear the hum of old ghosts. Somewhere in the hall beyond, he heard the alien officers drinking and boasting. Snatches of their talk reached him. Crude species incapable of calculated engagement, an amusing entry, nothing more. One voice, amused, certain, said, "This will be over before the crowd settles in." Elias smiled faintly. Good, he thought. Let them get comfortable. He reassembled the rifle, the pieces clicking together with a familiarity older than any star map in the Dominion's archives. It wasn't fast. It wasn't elegant. But it had never failed him when the world turned mean. When the barracks lights dimmed to simulate night, Elias lay back, staring at the ceiling. He thought of Callisto Verge, its wind-carved cliffs and rust-colored plains, the stubborn people who scraped life out of the dust. If he failed tomorrow, those people would be under the Dominion's heel by the next cycle. He thought of them, and of the fact that no one else was coming to fight for them. That was all he needed to remember. Morning came as a shift in the light, a slow bleed from cold blue to pale gold. The air in the staging bay was taut with anticipation. Across the wide space, HFY stood surrounded by a retinue of technicians adjusting his armor. His crystalline shell caught the light like a blade. He glanced once at Elias, then turned away as though looking at a corpse. An escort of Dominion guards approached, their movements synchronized, almost ceremonial. Competitors to the arena, one-intoned. They walked through a corridor of glass, the crowd's roar swelling beyond the walls. Elias could see the arena taking shape ahead. Jagged ridges, valleys veiled in mist, simulated weather systems already swirling overhead. It was beautiful in a brutal way, like a place carved by the slow patience of 1,000 storms. As they stepped into the open, the sound hit him like a wave. Cheers, jeers, the hum of alien voices layered over one another in a living wall of noise. Holoscreens flashed his image next to HFY, the statistical mismatch, so absurd it drew fresh laughter from the stands. Elias rolled his shoulders, shifted the rifle into place. Across the field, HFY spread his 4 arms, each weapon gleaming. Trial of arms, Theta 9, Dvor's amplified voice rang out. Begin. Elias met HFY's gaze across the expanse, and in that moment the noise of the crowd thinned to nothing. The champion's stance was perfect, a sculpted monument to precision. Elias's was relaxed, almost lazy, the kind of posture that made his enemies underestimate him just long enough to regret it. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then the world breathed in, holding itself still for the first strike. Wind scoured the valley in long, cutting bursts, carrying with it the metallic tang of the arena's simulated weather systems. Elias dropped low behind a splintered outcrop, the rifle cradled in his arms, as naturally as if it were a living thing. Across the jagged expanse, HFY moved like an insect carved from crystal and rage, each step measured, each weapon angled to anticipate an opponent's next breath. The champion's every movement was data-driven perfection, the kind of martial purity only a lifetime of engineer dominance could produce. The first shot was not meant to kill. Elias raised the rifle, sighted a seam in the rock high above HFY's position, and squeezed the trigger. The report cracked through the valley, echoing like thunder. The bullet struck stone, sending a rain of shards clattering down over the champion's advance. For the briefest moment, HFY altered his stride to shield his sensors from the debris. Elias saw it, a glitch in perfection. High in the Dominion observation decks, murmurs stirred. A calculated weapon discharge with no direct aim. Inefficient, pointless. Yet the archivist, Dvor, leaned forward in his grav chair, narrow eyes following the human with the attention one might give a puzzle missing its most important piece. Elias moved before the dust settled. He darted from the outcrop into the mist, his boots finding purchase on uneven stone, each step chosen for silence. The valley swallowed him whole. He knew better than to try and outrun the champion. This was about misdirection, not escape. The rifle was warm against his hands. He reloaded without looking, muscle memory guiding him as his mind mapped the terrain. A sharp ridge to the east, an unstable slope beyond. He could hear the faint hum of HFY drones circling above like patient vultures. The champion's voice came through the arena's comms, modulated and cold. Your maneuvers lack coherence, human. You flee from a mathematically inevitable outcome. Elias keyed his mic. Funny thing about inevitability, only works until it doesn't. There was a pause. No reply. He could imagine the champion dismissing the words as noise. That was fine. The more Exwaralath relied on his numbers, the better. A shadow moved through the fog ahead, tall, insectoid, bristling with light. Elias froze. The shape passed within 30 meters, each footfall heavy enough to make the ground quiver. He stayed still until the sound receded, then crept toward the eastern ridge. Midway up the incline, a flicker of light split the mist. A drone, its sensors sweeping. Elias ducked into a shallow crease in the rock, heart pounding. The beam passed, lingered, then moved on. He could hear his own breathing, too loud in the stillness. He was halfway to the ridge crest when a plasma bolt tore through the stone at his feet, throwing him sideways. Pain flared in his side, hot and sharp. He tumbled behind a jagged boulder, clutching at the scorched fabric of his uniform. Burn, not a puncture. He'd live. For now. Through the haze of pain, he heard the champion again, closer now. Prolonging failure is not victory. Elias gritted his teeth. Neither is rushing it. He forced himself upright, every breath a reminder of the wound. The ridge loomed above, and beyond it, he knew, was the environmental control hub, a cluster of exposed conduits feeding the arena's artificial climate. The aliens might see a battleground. He saw a system he could break. Every step upward was a negotiation with his body, but he made it. The hub squatted at the ridge's far side, armored but not impenetrable. Elias steadied his rifle, aimed for the narrowest point in a conduit's casing, and fired. The bullet punched through with a metallic scream. Sparks spat into the air. A low hum built into a roar as the wind shifted violently, carrying dust and grit in chaotic swirls. Across the arena, holoscreens flickered, recalculating. In the observation decks, analysts exchanged rapid, confused bursts of speech. Environmental variance outside program parameters, degradation detected in thermal balance. Dvor said nothing, but his hands moved faster over his data slab. Elias dropped flat, letting the storm rise. Visibility plunged to a few meters, the wind clawing at him with gritty fingers. Somewhere below, Exwaralath's sensors would be struggling to differentiate rock from flesh. Good. Let him guess for once. The champion did not slow. He strode into the storm, weapons poised, his armor's refractive plates bending what little light remained. But without perfect lines of sight, without absolute environmental control, his movements carried a hint of uncertainty. It was small, but Elias saw it. He slid prone along the ridge's edge, the rifle's barrel tracing slow arcs through the dust-choked air. The wind screamed. He could taste grit between his teeth. Each breath scraped his throat raw. Somewhere in that shifting blur of shapes was his target, but the shot wasn't ready. Not yet. A plasma bolt seared past, close enough for the heat to brush his cheek. He didn't flinch. He let the wind mask his position, let the champion fire at ghosts in the dust. One magazine left. 3 rounds. The world narrowed to sound. The muted hiss of shifting grit, the deeper thump of armored steps, the irregular ping of metal on stone. He closed his good eye, trusting the wind's rhythm. Another step. Closer. Elias exhaled. The rifle settled against his shoulder, as steady as it had been in his father's hands, and his father's before that. The storm parted for a heartbeat, just enough to reveal a crystalline chest plate, glinting with fractured light. And there, small, almost nothing, a flaw along the seam. He didn't fire. Not yet. Timing was everything, and one shot had to be enough. The wind roared back, swallowing the view. HFY's voice cut through it, harsh now, no longer the smooth cadence of certainty. Come out, human. Face what cannot be defeated. Elias smiled without humor. You've been saying that all day, starting to sound like you're trying to convince yourself. The champion's answering growl was swallowed by the storm. Elias crawled backward from the ridge, disappearing into the dust. His side ached, his lungs burned, but his mind was calm. The pattern was set. The storm would do its work, stripping away the champion's advantage inch by inch. And when the wind broke just right, there would be only one thing left to do. Somewhere above, the crowd strained to see through the chaos. Their cheers dimmed to a low, unsettled murmur. In the observation deck, Devore finally spoke, voice quiet but cutting. He is not fleeing. He is waiting. Elias lay still, counting heartbeats. The storm howled on, as if the entire arena had taken a single breath and held it. The next one would decide everything. Dust whipped across the ridge in violent spirals, the storm clawing at the ground as if trying to strip the battlefield bare. Elias lay prone, cheek pressed to the worn stock of his rifle, every muscle locked in stillness. The wind bit through his uniform, carrying with it the taste of scorched metal and grit. Somewhere beyond the swirling haze, HFY moved, predator without prey, perfection searching for something it could not predict. The champion's silhouette flickered in and out of the storm, refractive armor bending what little light filtered through. Four arms poised, weapons humming with lethal energy. Every step was deliberate, but there was an edge now, a hesitation buried under discipline, the faint tremor of an equation beginning to fail. Elias felt the weight of the moment pressing down like a loaded sky. This wasn't just a fight. If he failed, Callisto Verge would kneel under Dominion rule before the next sunrise. The people he knew, the stubborn miners, the weathered farmers, the kids with dirt under their fingernails, would be swallowed by a machine that had never tasted defeat. The Dominion didn't need to break bones. It broke hope. The storm eased for half a breath, revealing HFY at 200 meters, striding up the slope. Elias's finger brushed the trigger, but the wind surged back, cloaking the champion in moving shadow. Not yet. The shot had to be perfect. He could almost hear his father's voice again, low and certain. Wait until the world holds its breath. A plasma bolt hissed through the dust, carving molten scars in the stone inches from his head. Heat rolled over him. He didn't move. He couldn't afford to. The champion was firing blind now, his sensors choking in the interference. That was good. That meant the cracks in the armor weren't just literal anymore. The crowd above the arena was restless, their noise a shifting tide. Impatience from those who wanted blood, unease from those beginning to suspect this wasn't going to script. Elias could imagine their faces, the slow, dawning realization that the man with the rusted rifle was still alive. HFY's voice came through the comms, sharper now. You think this storm will save you? It will end. And when it does, you'll be standing in the open, unshielded. Elias smiled faintly. Then I guess I'd better make it count. He crawled 3 meters to his right, finding a hollow between two jagged slabs. It gave him a narrow angle on the slope below, just enough. The wind began to shift again, its pitch changing. He knew storms, real ones. On Earth, on fringe colonies, in wastelands where visibility dropped to nothing. There was always a moment before the gusts broke, a calm that felt unnatural. This was that moment. Through thinning grit, he caught a clear line to the flaw in HFY's chest plate, no larger than a coin. The champion was closing fast, stride unbroken despite the storm. Elias inhaled slowly. The rifle stock was warm from his hands, its weight familiar, reassuring. He let his mind fall into the same place it had during every fight worth remembering. Quiet, sharp, certain. One breath in, one breath out. The storm broke. Light cut through the haze, catching on HFY's armor. Elias squeezed the trigger. The rifle thundered, a sound raw and primal compared to the sterile hum of plasma. The recoil pressed into his shoulder. He saw the round strike home, punching clean through the flaw in the armor. HFY laughed staggered mid-step, a shudder running through all forearms. For a heartbeat, the champion remained upright, as if defiance alone could hold him. Then the light in his weapons guttered out, and his crystalline form collapsed to the ground, scattering dust in a final, quiet fall. Silence rolled across the arena. The storm's remnants swirled aimlessly, no longer driven by controlled systems. From above, the crowd stared. The statistics had been wrong. The simulations had failed. A human with a rusted rifle had just ended the Dominion's undefeated reign in a single shot. Elias pushed himself to his feet, the burn in his side flaring with each movement. He slung the rifle over his shoulder. He didn't raise it, didn't shout. He just started walking toward the arena's edge, boots crunching on gravel. The medics and guards who met him didn't speak. Up in the observation deck, Dvorak's voice broke the hush. Recorded outcome: victory, Homo sapiens. Cause: unpredicted behavioral variance. His gaze lingered on Elias, as if trying to understand what numbers could not. One of the Dominion officers called down to him. "How did you do it?" Elias glanced up, eyes steady. Didn't have to be pretty. Just had to work once. He kept walking, each step heavier than the last, as the adrenaline drained away. By the time he reached the gate, the crowd's silence had broken into something else. Not cheers, not quite. It was the sound of something shifting, a crack in the foundation. Outside the arena, the air was cooler. The rifle hung against his back, its metal still warm. He paused, looking out at the sky. For the first time in weeks, he let himself imagine Callisto Verge without the Dominion's shadow over it. In the weeks that followed, the Dominion honored the trial's outcome. The human colonies kept their autonomy, though Elias knew it would never be the end of the conflict. Word of the victory spread faster than the official reports, carried in mess halls and docking bays, whispered like a prayer. The rusted rifle became a symbol, its story growing with every retelling. On Earth, years later, it would hang in a museum, stock worn smooth, barrel still faintly pitted, a single round missing from the chamber. Visitors would stand before it in silence, imagining the storm, the shot, the fall of a champion. Archivist Dvorak's final report, declassified decades later, would carry only a single warning to the Dominion's High Council. Species 7-3 is not bound by prediction. Their strength lies in the spaces between calculation. Approach with caution. But on the day of the trial, in the moments after the shot, all Elias felt was the weight lifting from his shoulders. He had done what he came to do. He had proven that the rust wasn't decay. It was proof of endurance, of storms weathered and battles survived. And from that fire, humanity rose. Not the strongest, not the smartest, just the last to fall.